Okay, my wonderful friends, this is Roger once again, and if you've never heard of Josh Gates, you're missing something. He is the premier explorer, as far as I'm concerned, in my lifetime, and I've got a very long lifetime. So he's looking, he's thinking, he wants answers, and he really goes deep. But he's looking to the wrong people, and he assumes that this Mr. Hedges skull was carved, and there's other things about it. We're going to get into that pretty deep in a minute. But Josh, please, brother, contact me. This is not fake. This is real. It was not carved. It was a real skull. The jaw even is detachable. The jaw, as you know, the nose is wrinkled back because it was the dead laying on its face, and the lip and the nose wrinkled back. The brain caved down this way, just like normally you see it back here. All these fibers are identical, and I understand this because I discovered nucleophilic substitution, which was never understood in a biological context. Let me show you that first. But Josh, I need you to start to look at the things that I have discovered that change everything, my friend. And you're an explorer. You are the guy I would really put my trust in, and I'm hoping you'll respond. I've reached out before and I can never get contact, but if anybody can get contact with Josh, or anybody that knows him, or the Discovery Channel, history, anybody, I have things to present that change everything. Okay, this gets a little bit complicated, but not much. When you're alive, your body is continuously transferring molecules back and forth from electron dense to electron poor. And they do it with transition metals. And they go along for the ride on these extremely complex molecules. They grab bits and pieces and bring them back and forth, deliver them and pick up the trash. Basically, that's it. You're not even the tiniest bit stable when you're alive. Every molecule in your body is in a state of instability. And the only way it stays stable is to remove the carbon dioxide, bring in some oxygen, get rid of the trash, bring in some nutrients, and so forth. Now, your teeth enamel may be stable, but that's about it. Now, I discovered this process long ago, and that's how mud fossils change. And here's what they finally decided to look into it. It says the nucleophilic substitution reactions, and that's the substitution of what was once bone and is now mud, because it's stone, basically. And that is, it was substituted by what it was entombed in. Eventually, it just migrated in there and took over because it stabilized the things in here that would rot or be destroyed, but they were entombed in mud and waters and so forth. So the nucleophilic substitution reaction we have seen so far have all been laboratory reactions. They know these things happen, but they always did it in the laboratory to make different things from different things. They make from calcium, they make into, something else. And this is exactly what this is. So it's a biochemical process. Now, finally, let's take a look at a few examples of nucleophilic substitution in a biological context, not in a laboratory, in a biological context, in something that grows. How does it do nucleophilic substitution? We're doing it every single second of every single second. Of all of the principles we learned so far in chemistry still apply to these biochemical reactions. But in addition to what they were doing in the little dishes, we need to consider the role of the enzyme catalysts. Enzymes are products of bacteria. Your body is just completely loaded with bacteria, and the enzymes that those bacteria create is what makes you healthy, literally. It makes these molecules be able to come and go. It creates these transition metal complexes. Without these complexes created by enzymes from bacteria, you're going to be sick. So that's a little deeper than you needed to go, but the principle I'm bringing to you is that you are not stable now. You are continuously changing molecules, and that's the process that makes a goose and its feathers and everything change into stone. It's called nucleophilic substitution, and that is why the crystal skull took on a crystal matrix because it was in a chemistry that had enzymes and catalysts and bioreactive molecules that ate up all the weak biology in there, the stuff that can be converted quite easily. The tubing that controls all of the nerve impulses and so forth is literally tubing. And that stuff does not change like the rest of the stuff. The rest of the stuff takes on a complete silicate look. The tubing does not. The tubing has a little bit of a opaqueness to it. All right, this is another head that preserved in a completely different set of circumstances, but it's nucleophilic substitution. What did it substitute? Whatever it was in. What was it in? It was in mud and minerals and clays. What was the other one in? It was in some aggressive chemistry that took all the biology out of the Mitchell Hedges skull, and then what filtered back in was crystal quartz. That's just the way it works, the silicates. Now, this it belonged to Jim Burchell and Arlie Caudle down in Kentucky, and I worked on this with them 6-7 years ago, and the same thing happened. We had a hell of a problem with academia, and it ended up in an absolutely enormous fight. But this is another product of nucleophilic invasion. You see the nose? It's splayed over. There's the cartilage of the nose. This guy died with his nose down, or somebody stepped on his face. It looks to me like they caved his head in with some club. Red and black is the ferrous oxides, blood, FeO2 and FeO3, which is the red and black blood. This actually has some form of a cap on. You can see the weave of the cap. You see it, the weave? I looked at this very carefully, and we actually had this CAT scan as well, and that ended up to be a disaster because it was done by academia. They would not even make wouldn't allow one single phone call. Did the CAT scan? Get away. Never come back. And so this has ended up with a tragedy here as well, but that's been my 10-year experience with academia. So I need Josh Gates to stand up and say, let's look at this stuff. I'm an explorer. He's an explorer. I'm a scientist. He's a scientist. He's looking for answers, but he's got to look at their science and my science, because my science is not their science. And let me show you what nucleophilic substitution does and why this turned into a sandstone head and the other one turned into a glass silicon head. Okay, so I just wanted to be sure you understand that I am pretty certain about the fact that this was literally a living skull in a creature at one time. The teeth had me very perplexed because they are so blocky looking, but that appears to be what these people were like way back then. And they carved them on the walls, and they have exactly the same blocky looking teeth. So I'm going to push that off to the side. The rest I fully understand, and you could fully understand it. So why was there so much controversy about this? Well, because nobody understood the substitution angle, the nucleophilic substitution, and there is just a pushback to anything that is outside of academia. And I will show you how the academics responded and why Josh Gates sort of diminished this as, oh, this can't be real, basically. That's how I took it. Josh, I hope you will re-examine it, my good friend, because I see you as a hero in this realm. And this, you know, you're going out and doing a lot of work, man. I give you a lot of credit. And some of it's kind of freaking dangerous, man. So take care of yourself, buddy. But I got stuff you really should see, my friend. Really, really, really need to see it to be able to do the things you're doing and come to them with a new, you know, set of eyes, basically. Because nobody can see this stuff. Their eyes just don't see it. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You should watch his stuff. He's fabulous. They found this pot way deep in a cave, and to get to this cave was an enormous amount of work. And they reported all their findings to the ministry down there, and they are looking into it, and they're going to do a research project on these things. But I would also like to be involved in that because they need a new set of eyes as well. Okay, so this is what Josh is going to show you about the discovery of the skull. Here goes. And he's going to talk about Mitchell Hedges, and apparently his story changed over the years. I'll let Josh explain it. Here he goes.
His journey to the Maya city of Lubantun. There are basically two versions of this story, and they're both told by Mitchell Hedges. Hedges wrote two autobiographies. The first, a book called The Land of Wonder and Fear, which he published in 1931, just after his time here. The other, toward the end of his life in the 1950s, the much more famous Danger My Ally. And in each book, he describes this event. In the earlier book, Hedges is led to the lost city by natives, who basically present it to him on a silver platter. 20 years later, though, the story changes, and he is the one who discovers Lubantun, using his wits and a machete. In the first version, Hedges is a traveler. In the second, he's the hero. Two versions of one adventure. And like all things associated with Mitchell Hedges, the truth lies somewhere in the unknown.
All right, so we have to look into this a little deeper. It appears that it may not be totally just a discoverer that discovered it, but regardless, is the head real or not? Well, it is as far as I'm concerned. Okay, now it picks back up again. So he's saying, yes, it is a single block of crystal. Well, it's a skull that filled in with silicates through that nucleophilic substitution process.
Of crystal, if it was multiple crystals, you would not see the splitting of light in this direction.
So this was made from a single piece?
Yes.
So far, Hedges' story that the skull was forged from a single piece of crystal stands up. But to find out when the skull was made, Dr. Celestian wants to dig deeper. If this was made by the Maya or pre-Maya, we would expect that it was made using stone tools. If it was made in the early 20th century, as some people have suggested, we might find modern tool marks or evidence of modern abrasives, right?
It is possible, yes.
I just want to say that none of these ideas are wrong. It's just that they're not looking at them with the kind of eyes that we have now to understand, let's think about biology. And that's what I'm saying, think about it. I'm not saying 100% for sure every time. But this one here, I'm saying, as far as I'm concerned, 100%, no question whatsoever. And the scrub marks that he's going to find are not scrub marks, they're growth marks.
This is telling me that this is a single block of crystal. If it was multiple crystals, you would not see the splitting of light in this direction.
So this was made from a single piece?
Yes.
So far, Hedges' story that the skull was forged from a single piece of crystal stands up. But to find out when the skull was made, Dr. Celestian wants to dig deeper. If this was made by the Maya or pre-Maya, we would expect that it was made using stone tools. If it was made in the early 20th century, as some people have suggested, we might find modern tool marks or evidence of modern abrasives, right?
It is possible, yes.
We take the crystal mandible and bring it to an X-ray fluorescence microscope, while the rest of the skull is run through a spectroscopy machine. The results should tell us every element present in and on the crystal.
Vast majority of what is present is silicon. We're also seeing traces.
All right, silicon will fill in voids. That's just the way it works. So, and you have to understand, silicon is just below carbon. I mean, it's a higher element than carbon, but we are carbon-based creatures, and silicon replaces the carbon. That's the nucleophilic substitution.
Other elements like calcium.
Calcium's coming probably from the teeth, strong teeth.
Calcium not in the teeth, my friend. Calcium are mostly in the bones, but you will find bits and pieces of, because again, it's nucleophilic substitution. Things are riding back and forth on each other's back. Primarily if the invasion is so complete that all of the organics go, then it just becomes a complete empty space that fills in with silicon.
We're not on the teeth right now, but
That was my attempt The elements in the scan show that the skull's origins may be in Central or South America, which may fit Hedges' claims. But there's nothing on here to definitively date it. The only thing left to do is look at the markings on the skull itself.
This is exactly what you see on bones. They have these tiny little depressions which probably had hair in them or who knows what, and then you had all of the bone structure.
What jumps out at me is that the striations and the scratching are all unbelievably parallel. They're all going in the same direction. This is telling me that it wasn't a rag or something that somebody was just polishing like you polish a car. They're always going in one direction. My analysis of the marks means that it was polished using a unidirectional technique like a polishing wheel of some kind. And also machine polished by humans.
So, in your mind, no doubt, there's a machine polish happening here. There's some sort of uniform polishing.
That's correct.
Right.
All right, no doubt. This is where the issue comes apart, because I can show you there's no doubt that a skull is growth patterned exactly in that manner. So until you, Josh, my good friend, have a new set of eyes to say, well, wait a minute, what if that was really growing? What would it look like? Can we see a picture of a skull that was actually a growth in a human being and look at that skull pattern, and let's see what we would see. It's exactly what you see is these patterns. They are exactly going in one direction no matter where you are. Now, this is one of the most detailed books there is on anatomy, and believe me, it shows it exactly in all of these spots. You see that? And it shows the skull of a newborn. That's how the skull of the newborn develops. All right, so this is not something that we cannot account for. So, Josh, new eyes, my friend. Okay, so we're going to get back to the conclusion of what they decided about the skull.
If it was hand polished, it would have a different signature. That's right. Since the Maya and other pre-Columbian civilizations before them lacked the wheel, uniform polishing marks like this would seem to be direct evidence that the skull was made in modern times by a high-speed machine, likely one with high-grade diamond-coated bits. But whether this scientific evidence convinces Bill is less certain. Does seeing this sway you at all to believe it was made in the 20th century?
No.
It doesn't?
Not even one bit, no. I believe it was made by someone that had a higher level of technology than we have today, yes.
Which is a great idea, but the problem, of course, with that is we don't really have evidence of that technology.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it doesn't really matter, because one person has their opinion, and this one has that one.
Sometimes with science, though, you have to listen to the monitor over there that's hooked up to the laser.
Well,
don't
it's telling me exactly what I believe. I believe that it wasn't some Mayan sitting there polishing by hand. It had to be brought there by a civilization that had advanced technology.
See, this is the issue. They don't realize that these things can turn to stone. A goose can turn to stone. It's all nucleophilic substitution, brand new science, basically. And I have things that need to be examined now that have been just not examined because they've just been denied. Now, Josh, I think, is a guy that would look at the truth of this. I can't find any academics to look at the truth of what I present. Even though I have DNA evidence, I have DNA tests, Josh. I have CAT scans. I have my specimens, and I have them in voluminous quantities. So please, my friend, reach out to me or respond in some way. Somebody try to get through to Josh, and he's my last hope. I'm telling you, it's entrenched the thinking of people that are focused on one thing. Like that guy, I'm sure he's wonderful, spectroscopy and his lasers and all that, absolutely fabulous. However, he's obviously doesn't understand anatomy and physiology and all of the other things that you need to go along, and maybe chemistry. I don't know how he is with that, but all of that stuff leads to the result. You can't have a piece here and a piece here and a piece here, and nobody understands anything, basically, is what it boils down to. That's what modern science has come up to, is just little bits and pieces that are not understood by anybody, because they're just bits and pieces. All right, so let's see how it ends here.
Even though we have no evidence for that technology.
A lot of it's being hidden, but yes. When you see the skull and you're with the skull and you feel that energy, it's a gift, it's a blessing, it's a wonderful thing. That's what matters.
I admire Bill's spirit, but I also believe his unwavering focus on the more fantastic parts of Hedges' journey overshadows, I believe, Hedges' true legacy. He bravely traveled deep into the jungles of Honduras, exposing vast Maya ruins, and sailed into the uncharted Bay Islands, uncovering exquisite pottery and relics that alerted the world to a barely known culture that predated the Maya. In our own journey, we too uncovered evidence that this ancient culture is still largely forgotten, with a treasure trove of history waiting to be shared with the modern world. But Hedges became obsessed that this civilization was advanced beyond reason, and the skull has become the embodiment of that idea.
All right, I'm going to leave it at this. The skull was not manufactured, it was from nucleophilic substitution, and I imagine it was also from the Great Flood, which all of my stuff is from the Great Flood as well. But my stuff was not in the conditions this was probably in some kind of a cenote where it was completely watery, some type of pH that was invasive enough to take out all the organic material, and then it was invaded by the quartz veins. You know, whenever they talk about quartz veins, this and that, well, that's the veins of literally creatures evacuated and filled with quartz, just like this did. The whole thing was replaced by quartz. Quartz wants to deal with the same chemistry as carbon. See it? Silicon is quartz. Carbon right underneath it. They both have 4 valence electrons. They both bond similarly. Silicon is a more dense form of carbon, basically. That's what it boils down to. Now let me just point out something. You see these little dots here? Those are bone foramen, and they sink in, and blood vessels and so forth, and nerves go through these holes. Now, that's one thing to consider. Now, the teeth were the thing that really got me perplexed before, but I think I resolved that issue. Now, the other thing was, he said it looked like it was buffed with wheels, and they were all running a certain pattern of these little you know, the indentations, like they were, like it was sanded almost, like, but only in one direction, not like all different directions. But that is the nature of the way these bones work. So this is not something that should be a problem. All right, here was the thing that always perplexed me, was how perfectly aligned these teeth are, and so forth. Now there's that little blood spot I was talking about, the bone foramen. And of course you can see the tissues that are in the brain, which are the nerve fibers, are virtually the same. And this is a product of nucleophilic substitution. You will not get exactly the same product everywhere, because there are differences in the fibers. Fibers are the thing that really, the sheathing of nerves and so forth is really, really tough and durable and like a hose, and they just don't change as much as everything else does. Everything else is more or less fluidy, gooey, muddy, it turns, while fibers are a little bit different, and they are more or less almost like tendons, but they surround nerves and so forth. And that's what we see here. We see it's exactly what it is. And you can see it was on its nose. The nose and everything is pushed back, and the back of the brain has slid forward, so it would be on its face like this, the nose facing down. And that's why this big chunk of the back of the brain has moved forward, and this all filled with the silicates. Now, this is where I resolved the issue with the teeth, because they are so perfect. As I showed you, the anatomical version, the teeth are sort of rounded and they come down. These come down square as little chunks. So I did this. I said, the crystal skull teeth issue resolved, update. This was, I had several years I had been posting about this crystal skull. Very few people interested. But here's what I found looking around down there in South America. You see, they showed them all perfectly flat like that. And they're perfectly aligned and perfectly chunky flat. They look silly, but so does the ones in the Mitchell Hedges skull. You see how ours are sort of rounded looking? And the Mitchell Hedges ones are just flat as a pancake. See, this is what really perplexed me, how exactly squared off these teeth are. So, but the ones that were carved in the walls down there have the same looking teeth. So I'm resolving that issue. Somehow they had that kind of teeth. Why? I don't know. But we can see the fibers are exactly the same, and the blood vessels and all that stuff is, and the jaw is actually removable. So it was somebody's skull. All right, this is why I'm so frustrated. I get these every day. Your comment goes against our community standards on spam and false and fraud and so forth. And all I did was put up that I have a fingertip, that the nail and the prints are perfect, and it's DNA supported right here. Well, they block me every day for putting any of this stuff up. And here's the nail and the fingerprint, and here's the DNA report right here. It's not, that's what it is. If you can say it's not real, say it's not real. But it is real, and I have, it's a fact. And I have the specimens to back me up, so, and here they are right here. There's the fingernail. You see the tape measure, it's almost, I think it's like 36 inches long, something like that. And that's just a fingertip, and that's a bone bump in the back, that has a little pad, blood supplies, and the fingernail. Not only did I have that, I had the fingerprint side too. There's the fingerprints. They're absolutely flawless, and it's another product of this nucleophilic substitution. I understand it flawlessly now. And this came right off just exactly like you peel that skin off. I smacked it with a hammer and snapped right off as a layer like this. And there's the fingerprints. And my thumb is the same size as that. It's the same size as one ridge in a fingerprint. So I have very little options anymore other than to just keep doing what I'm doing. They've got me so clamped down. My YouTube channel has very, very few hits. And I'm blocked pretty much on everything from YouTube now. I'm from Facebook, so I don't do much there. So the suppression just continues. And this is by design, and it's by design by academia to keep control of their narrative, which is against reality and truth. So unless somebody steps up and helps, I don't know. There's nothing I can do anymore. I'm pretty well done.